Right now, and I mean literally at this exact second, there is this massive, entirely invisible financial leak happening in your enterprise.
Yeah, and you aren't going to find it looking at, a bad software contract or trying to audit a bloated marketing budget.
Exactly. It is definitely not a supply chain failure. You are flushing millions of dollars and honestly, countless human hours down the drain every single day. And the truly wild part is that you're doing it simply because your company is trying to remember what was said in a room.
It's completely hidden in plain sight. I mean, welcome to the Innovation Unpacked Deep Dive. Look, we are not talking about generic productivity hacks today.
Right, no keyboard shortcuts here.
Exactly. We aren't going to give you some little trick to save 5 minutes on your calendar.
Yeah.
We are looking at a structural nightmare that is just fundamentally breaking modern workflows.
Today, we are opening a genuinely fascinating dossier. It's a manifesto titled Stop Building AI Note Takers by Mike Boysen. And when you really get into the weeds of this document, it's a paradigm-shifting blueprint.
It completely redefines what we accept as normal in business operations.
Totally. And if you are listening to this and thinking, well, I just jot down a few bullet points during my call, so this doesn't really apply to my team, Boysen's math is about to completely ruin your afternoon.
Because Boysen is attacking a concept he calls data debt. And I love this term. We build these massive, incredibly expensive teams of brilliant professionals, right? And then we saddle them with an administrative architecture that basically belongs in the 1990s.
Yeah, fax machine era stuff.
Seriously. But we need to set the stage here. To understand the cure Boysen is proposing, you have to genuinely feel the pain of the disease.
Oh, absolutely. The dossier gives us this perfect, really granular case study of a firm called Lumina Partners. They are an elite B2B consulting group, top tier. The consultants there are brilliant. They're highly paid experts who are solving wildly complex problems for enterprise clients.
But beneath that polished, high-billing surface, their operational foundation is just completely cracking.
Cracking is putting it mildly. The raw numbers from Lumina are staggering. Every single month, the consultants at this firm are burning 10,000 hours. 10,000. Strictly on manual CRM data entry and drafting executive summaries from their client discovery calls.
10,000 hours a month. I mean, let's actually zoom in on what that looks like on the ground, because an aggregate number like that can sort of abstract the actual human misery involved in the process.
Right. It just sounds like a big corporate metric.
Exactly. So let's look at one specific consultant from the dossier. We'll call him David. David is highly paid. He's highly trained. He gets on a high-stakes, 60-minute discovery call with a prospective client. Now, let's evaluate David's cognitive load during that hour.
It's like, the way I picture it, it's like trying to fly a fighter jet while simultaneously sketching the instrument panel.
Yes, or trying to watch a really complex, fast-paced foreign film and being forced to write the English subtitle translations in real time.
That is the perfect way to look at it, because the second you look down to write the translation, you miss the actor's subtle facial expression on the screen.
Right. You are physically incapable of being in two temporal realities at once.
His attention is completely fractured. I mean, he is trying to actively listen to the client's complex business problems. He is trying to formulate insightful, strategic questions to guide the conversation based on what the client literally just said. And at the exact same time, he is frantically typing out notes so he doesn't forget the budget constraints they mentioned 3 minutes ago.
Which is just a brutal way to work. And then, and this is the worst part, the call ends. The hour is up. David hangs up the phone. And as the dossier methodically breaks down, that is when the real workflow nightmare begins.
Right, the meeting after the meeting.
Exactly. David is staring at his own messy notes. He opens up Salesforce or whatever CRM the firm relies on, and he then spends the next 30 minutes just trying to parse out the core objectives from his own shorthand.
Trying to read his own chicken scratch.
Right. What was the exact budget? What was the implementation timeline? Who are the actual decision makers? He is manually typing all this unstructured mess into the appropriate fields in the software.
Which is incredibly tedious on its own, but the aftermath doesn't even stop there. After that 30 minutes of pure data entry, he opens a new Word document, and he spends another 45 minutes synthesizing those same shorthand notes into a polished executive summary to share with his internal partners.
So let's run the math on a single meeting. 30 minutes in the CRM plus 45 minutes drafting a document. That is 75 minutes of pure administrative cleanup.
Wow. He just spent 75 minutes managing data for a 60-minute call?
Yeah. He spent more time doing administrative data entry than he did actually executing his core competency, which is, talking to the client. And here is the absolute kicker. He has to do this 4 times a day.
4 times a day. So David has these messy notes, and he eventually gets them into the system. But, and this is a huge point, what happens if David quits tomorrow?
Oh, the knowledge walks right out the door with him.
Exactly. The company owns his laptop, sure, but they don't own the subtext of that client call. It is gone. That exposes the real structural threat here, which Boysen identifies as data debt.
Data debt is the silent killer of the modern enterprise. I mean, every time a meeting ends, where do the insights actually go?
Usually nowhere.
Right. If the nuance of a client's hesitation is locked inside David's head or buried in a physical notebook on his desk, you are accumulating debt as an organization. You are actively losing institutional knowledge. The company bleeds intellectual capital every single day because the capture mechanism relies entirely on human memory and manual entry.
So if you're a leadership team, the obvious executive reflex here is to recognize the bleeding neck problem and just buy a tool to patch it.
The shiny object syndrome.
Oh, 100%. You see your highly paid consultants drowning in administrative work, so you throw them a technological life raft, you buy a transcription bot, you throw an AI meeting assistant into the Zoom call, and you tell your board, hey, look, we fixed the efficiency problem.
But Boysen argues that just creates an entirely different kind of mess.
The dossier calls this the near-miss solution, and it's so common. The executives at Lumina Partners recognized the pain. They bought enterprise licenses for a popular AI transcription tool, and they mandated it for every client meeting.
They honestly thought they solved the bottleneck.
Right, but they failed miserably because they confused a feature with an outcome.
Which is such a crucial distinction. Capturing words is a feature. Execution is an outcome.
Let's really look at the messy reality of human speech here. I mean, have you ever actually read a raw, verbatim transcript of a 1-hour professional conversation?
Oh, it was a nightmare. It is almost incomprehensible.
It reads like a completely disorganized stream of consciousness. Human speech is wildly inefficient.
We talk in massive looping circles. We use filler words endlessly.
Like we're doing it right now.
Exactly. We jump across 5 different completely unrelated topics in the span of 3 minutes. A client will be answering a direct question about software pricing, suddenly pivot to a story about how their weekend was derailed by a kid's soccer tournament, complain about the weather, and then 20 minutes later, casually dropped the actual budget number while discussing an entirely different topic.
Wait, I have to play devil's advocate for a second. I want to push back on Boysen here.
Okay, go for it.
If I am the lead consultant closing a $2 million enterprise implementation deal, I actually think I want that verbatim transcript. I want the mud pit. I want every single word. Because I don't trust an AI to accurately summarize the client's legal hesitations or compliance fears. If there is a dispute 6 months from now about what was promised, I need that transcript as an absolute system of record. Isn't having a perfect record better than risking a hallucination and losing the data entirely?
Look, I get that, but you are conflating 2 entirely different enterprise needs. Yes, you want an immutable system of record for compliance and legal security, absolutely.
Right.
But that is just storing an audio file and a raw text log in some AWS bucket. That costs fractions of a penny. But what Boysen is talking about here is the system of action. Handing a highly paid strategist a literal 40-page verbatim transcript of a conversational mess is not an operational workflow. You are giving them a massive chore.
Because, yeah, I see what you mean, because they still have to read it to figure out what to put in Salesforce.
Exactly. This is what Boysen calls the transcription trap. Think about what the executive team actually did to David's workflow when they bought that bot. They did not remove the human from the loop. They simply changed David's job title.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Used to be a note taker. Now, he's a transcript editor. You are forcing a brilliant, strategic mind to act like a data miner. He's panning for gold in a river of conversational mud.
You haven't eliminated the bottleneck at all. You just shifted it down the assembly line.
Instead of David trying to actively recall the meeting from memory, he is staring at a 40-page wall of text at 4 in the afternoon.
He is exhausted, beyond exhausted, and he has to read through all those tangents about the soccer tournament just to extract the 3 action items he actually needs to advance the deal.
And editing a raw transcript is soul-crushing work. The cultural bleed from this is catastrophic. It is not just David wasting an hour today. Multiply that friction.
Right, scale it up.
It is 200 consultants wasting an hour every single day for an entire year. You are taking your absolute best talent, your highest paid problem solvers, and you are forcing them into administrative drudgery. They burn out, they get deeply frustrated, and the quality of their actual strategic consulting degrades because they are just too exhausted from parsing data.
Yes, the executives at Lumina Partners made a critical error in how they approached the problem. They engaged in reasoning by analogy.
Yes, the worst kind of problem solving.
They looked at the old, broken analog process, which was a human writing down words on a notepad, and they just swapped it for a digital equivalent, which is a machine writing down words in a document. They literally just digitized the inefficiency.
They assumed that humans are naturally good at parsing massive blocks of unstructured text. But we aren't. We are terrible data parsers. Humans are built for high-level synthesis, for strategic foresight, for empathy. We are not biologically designed to comb through endless paragraphs looking for a hidden timeline constraint.
Which brings us to the moment Boysen completely tears this problem down to the studs. He introduces a methodology he calls Socratic deconstruction.
I love this part of the dossier.
It's so good. You don't start by brainstorming new interface features for a note-taking application. You have to hunt for first principles.
Let's actually walk through what that Socratic deconstruction looks like in practice, because it's illuminating. If you ask an engineering team why they're building a note-taking app, they say, well, people need to remember meetings.
Okay, why do they need to remember meetings?
Because they need to know what to do next.
Why do they need notes to know what to do next?
Because human memory is faulty.
And why is human memory faulty in this specific context?
Because the brain cannot actively participate in a complex dialogue and perfectly record it simultaneously.
Boom. You strip away every layer of assumption until you hit a fundamental, unarguable truth. And that axiomatic truth Boysen identifies is a strict biological limit. It is about the cognitive architecture of the human brain.
The human brain operates as a single-threaded processor when it comes to language synthesis.
I really want to unpack the mechanism here because this is where the cognitive science directly collides with enterprise operations. When Boysen says single-threaded, he means you literally cannot run two complex language programs in your working memory at the same time.
You physically can't.
Right. You cannot actively listen to a complex problem, analyze the strategic intent behind the words, and write down a coherent, structured summary simultaneously.
If we look at Baddeley's model of working memory, you have the phonological loop, right? That processes the spoken language you are hearing. When you try to write notes, you are forcing that exact same neural pathway to generate and structure outbound language. The system overloads. When you split your attention like that, knowledge fidelity instantly degrades.
It just falls apart.
Every single time David looks down at his keyboard to type a bullet point, he is physically leaving the conversation.
And the client is sitting there dropping subtle, unled hints. Maybe there's a slight hesitation when they discuss the budget. Maybe their tone shifts when they mention their CEO's priorities.
And David misses all of it.
He is entirely blind to that subtext because his working memory is currently occupied trying to spell a vendor's name correctly from a sentence spoken 30 seconds ago.
It is a biological constraint. You cannot bypass it with willpower. You cannot bypass it by sending David to a typing speed course. And this completely reframes the foundational problem. The problem is not that note-taking is hard, or that we need an app with a cleaner interface. Note-taking itself is just a symptom of a broken process. The core problem is that the physical act of manual capture actively destroys active engagement.
This is Boysen's core hypothesis. What if we completely structurally separate the act of listening from the act of documenting? What if we remove the cognitive burden of capture entirely from the human being?
That's the dream, isn't it?
If you do that, the professional won't just experience less burnout. They will perform exponentially better in the room. The goal is not, and never should have been, acquiring a transcript. The goal is absolute, uncompromised cognitive presence during the dialogue, followed by flawless data extraction after the fact.
But look, to convince an enterprise to completely rip out their operational architecture, we cannot just talk about cognitive science and burnout. Executives don't buy that. We have to size the friction. We have to put a cold, hard number on the financial damage being done.
Show me the money.
Exactly. And this leads us to the architectural breakdown in the dossier. And honestly, the math here is brutal.
Boysen introduces a metric that I think is going to become mandatory reading for operations teams. It is called the inefficiency delta.
I need to preface this because most companies calculate inefficiency completely wrong.
Oh, totally.
You do not measure your inefficiency by comparing yourself to your primary competitor. If the firm across the street takes an hour to write an executive brief and your team does it in 45 minutes, you pat yourselves on the back and think you are winning.
But if the underlying process is fundamentally broken, you are just striving to be the best of the worst. You are fighting for a 10% incremental gain in a system that literally shouldn't exist at all.
The inefficiency delta strips all of those corporate vanity metrics away. It is a strict mathematical ratio. The formula is the current commercial cost to execute a specific job, which is your numerator, divided by the absolute theoretical or digital floor to do that exact same job, which is your denominator.
Okay, let's actually calculate the numerator for Lumina Partners. Let's find out exactly what this analog capture process is costing them in real dollars. We go back to David's workflow. He finishes his 60-minute discovery call. As we mapped out earlier, he spends 30 minutes doing data entry in Salesforce and 45 minutes drafting his Word document summary.
That is 75 minutes of administrative labor.
Right. Now, Lumina Partners bills David out to their enterprise clients at $500 an hour.
Which is incredibly premium labor.
Highly premium. So 75 minutes of David's time is commercially worth $625. That means every single time David hangs up the phone, the firm is burning $625 in billable potential just to do the administrative cleanup of remembering the meeting.
And because he does this 4 times a day, that is $2,500 a day per consultant just bleeding out into the ether.
Yeah.
So our numerator is $625.
That is the harsh reality of the current state. Now we need the denominator. We need to identify the true digital floor. And this is where the reasoning by analogy trap catches executives again. A chief operating officer will look at their software spend and say, well, we pay $30 a month per user for the AI transcription bot. There is our digital floor.
But that is not the floor, because that $30 a month subscription still requires David to sit there, read the 40-page transcript, parse the unstructured data, and manually paste it into the CRM. The job is not done.
The human being is still in the loop.
Precisely, doing all the heavy cognitive lifting of synthesis. To find the true digital floor, we have to completely ignore how the firm currently operates. We have to look only at the physical limits of modern compute power.
So what is the raw cost to run 1 hour of audio through an advanced large language model, extract the exact strategic intent, strip out all the conversational filler, and push that structured data via API directly into Salesforce and a polished Word document?
It costs pennies. When Boysen talks about an LLM extracting intent here, he does not mean a simple keyword search. We need to look at the mechanics of this. The system is using semantic structuring.
Right, it's not just hitting CTRL-F.
Exactly. When the AI processes the audio, it isn't hitting CTRL-F looking for the word budget. It is mathematically mapping the conversational vectors. It recognizes that when the client says, look, we only have room for 5 figures this quarter because of the recent merger, that specific cluster of meaning is the budget constraint, even though the word budget was literally never spoken.
The model parses the entire context window, extracts the specific intents the firm has predefined, formats them into a structured JSON payload, and routes them via API to the specific endpoint in the CRM. How much does that entire compute pipeline cost per meeting?
The dossier points out that it requires a few seconds of raw compute time.
Right.
Even if we are being incredibly generous, right, accounting for premium enterprise API routing, secure data enclaves for privacy, and maximum token processing, the digital floor is 25 cents,
Right.
$0.25. That is our denominator.
Let's do the final math on the inefficiency delta. We take the $625 commercial cost of the human process, and we divide it by the 25-cent digital floor of the automated pipeline. What is the ratio?
The delta is 2,500.
2,500. Your current operational process is 2,500 times more expensive than the digital floor. That number is not a slight margin of error. It is a siren.
What does a delta of 2,500 actually tell a business leader? It mathematically proves that you cannot optimize your way out of this problem.
No way.
You do not send David to a time management seminar. You don't hire an efficiency consultant to see if he can take notes 10% faster. And you certainly don't try to negotiate a 5% discount on your SaaS licenses.
A SaaS discount is not going to save you from a 2,500 delta. When the inefficiency is that massive, the only logical step is to completely delete the existing process and architect a new one. Forcing a brilliant human mind to execute the work of a 25-cent API call is absolute madness.
So how do we actually fix the architecture? This leads us to the results of Boysen's framework. the application of these axioms, and it starts with defining the real job. Most software engineering teams immediately start coding a shiny new user interface without understanding the actual goal.
They say, let's build a better note-taking app with colored tags and AI summaries.
But taking notes is an illusion. It is an artifact of the analog era. The true job to be done, and the dossier is incredibly strict about defining this, is transferring spoken client intent into an actionable execution format. The client does not care about your verbatim notes.
Nope.
The internal implementation partners do not care about your notes. They only care about the deliverables. They care about execution.
Once you define the job that way, you stop building tools to help humans take notes, and you start building systems that eliminate the need for notes entirely. You can pull what the manifesto calls the innovation levers. The first lever is ecosystem integration.
And the architecture of this is beautiful.
It really is. You build a workflow where an AI agent actively listens to the audio stream in the background. It maps the semantic vectors to extract only the predefined strategic intent. It finds the budget, the timeline, the technical blockers, and the competitor objections.
All automatically?
And then it pushes that structured data payload directly into the firm's tech stack. It hits the API endpoint and updates the correct fields in Salesforce automatically. It creates a new project card in Notion. It pings the engineering channel in Slack with the technical requirements. It is automatic, instantaneous data entry with zero human copy-pasting required.
You completely remove the friction point. The system handles the administrative entry, so David never even has to open the CRM interface. But you still have the problem of communicating the high-level strategy to the executives. That brings us to the second innovation lever, which is visual data synthesis.
Because let's be realistic about executive behavior. Leadership teams are overwhelmed.
They do not want to read a 40-page raw transcript.
And frankly, they don't even want to read a 5-page text summary generated by an AI. They want immediate clarity.
They want visual decision frameworks. So you build the pipeline to automatically convert that extracted conversational data into presentation-ready assets. The system takes the timeline constraints and the budget parameters and automatically generates strategic infographics, risk matrices, and slide decks.
The ultimate result of pulling these levers is that you completely remove the human bottleneck from the data processing pipeline. You let the machines handle the heavy data parsing. You let the compute clusters pan for gold in the conversational mud.
And you free up your highly paid human talent to focus entirely on what humans actually do best, which is high-level strategic thinking, empathy, and complex problem solving.
You achieve the true goal: absolute cognitive presence in the room during the meeting and flawless, instantaneous data execution after the fact.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
Let's synthesize this massive shift we have just unpacked. What Boysen's dossier has done is give you the architectural blueprint to completely eradicate organizational amnesia. Note-taking is no longer just a necessary evil or an accepted administrative chore. It is biological bottleneck, and it is a catastrophic financial waste.
You are walking away from this deep dive with a totally new analytical toolkit. You understand Socratic deconstruction. You know how to tear a workflow down to its unarguable first principles. You have the undeniable ruthless math of the inefficiency delta. And you understand the true job to be done.
You are now equipped to walk into an executive leadership meeting and mathematically prove why digitizing a bad analog process is a massive waste of capital.
The final takeaway is crystal clear. Let the machines handle the 25-cent mud. Let your people handle the strategy.
But I want to leave you with a final provocative thought, something that extends far beyond just this one dossier. We have established that single-threaded biological limits make note-taking a catastrophic waste of human potential. But look around your own enterprise workflow. Where else in your daily professional life are you forcing your brain or your team's brains to act like clumsy transcriptionists instead of strategic thinkers? What other 25-cent API administrative tasks are secretly draining your company's intellectual capital right now? Because if the capture mechanism is broken in your meeting rooms, where else is the data debt hiding?